Hello, and welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. She is the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. It's January 17th, 2024. I'm Harley Schlanger, and I will be your host. We'll take your questions. You can send them to us at questions@schillerinstitute.org or post them on the YouTube chat page. Now, Helga, we're in what might be described as a zone of increased instability between a collapsing, discredited unipolar order, which is defended by US NATO military force, and an emerging order of mutually beneficial cooperation, sometimes inadequately described as a multipolar order. The wars and the provocations from the West are continuing, even as diplomacy for economic cooperation, typified by the BRICS process, is moving ahead. You've pointed out that this is both a very dangerous moment, but also one of great potential. So we have a lot of questions from people on what can be done to make sure this goes in the right direction. So let's begin with your analysis of these two opposing directionalities towards the geopolitical conflicts and expanding war versus cooperation and economic development. Where are we headed, and what can people do to make sure we go in the right direction?
Well, let me start with the dangerous side. I think we are clearly in an extremely dangerous situation. The situation in Southwest Asia is, on the edge of getting a larger conflict, a regional conflict. You had the hype around the attacks on ships in the Red Sea and the Houthis. The blame is that they were backed by Iran, and that would mean basically, that eventually Iran could be involved. Now, there is no proof, to my knowledge, that the Houthis are backed by Iran. As a matter of fact, they have stated many times that they are very independent. But be it as it may, Russia has just signed a major treaty with Iran, including a large military component, so that, basically it is now crystal clear that what was known to, observers for many decades, that once a Mideast war expands involving Iran, it does have the potential of becoming an even larger, eventually world war. And if Iran and Russia are now united by a military treaty, then that for sure has been made very clear. But also India has good relations with Iran. The Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Jaishankar, was just in Tehran, also, making major agreements. So I think the situation in Southwest Asia remains the absolute center of the dangers, especially, because after the historic events last week in Den Hague, where the South African government had sued Israel with the accusation of committing genocide in Gaza, which naturally was totally denied by Israel. But even Haaretz, the Israeli paper, said, let's assume it is not genocide what is happening. How would you call then the denying of any food, medicine, water from almost 2 million people, where even World Health Organization and other UN experts are saying that the danger is that many more people will die of disease in the coming weeks, especially children. Children, babies, sucklings, small children, pregnant women are the most vulnerable in this situation. And how would you call that if not genocide? So that's coming from Israel itself. So, hopefully the court in Den Hague will make an injunction, basically forcing Israel to make a ceasefire and unlimited access for humanitarian supplies. So hopefully this will happen this week, next week, because it's super, super urgent. Now, what will happen with the Den Hague judgment in general is obviously the big question. Normally, it could take several months before a ruling is being made. It is also clear that the United States has a very hard position. Blinken said that the accusation in Den Hague has, quote, no merit. I mean, come on. So one can expect that, there will be maximum pressure on these judges. In the meantime, a large number of lawyers from South Africa is suing the United States and Great Britain for complicity in genocide. And also inside the United States, there is a suit filed against Biden for similar reasons. So this issue will remain with us, but, I think that is starting to, discuss the question of what to do about it. What we have put on the agenda in terms of immediate ceasefire, Mideast comprehensive conference, and then especially to put the question of a two-state solution on the table, however, which can only work if there is the implementation of the Oasis plan, which is the idea of a comprehensive economic development plan focusing on the creation of new fresh water through the building of canals from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea and the Red Sea, and using that water then for massive desalination, irrigation of the deserts, and that way create economic conditions for Israel and Palestine to work in this two-state solution, but with the idea that everybody will benefit from it. That's the only workable way how we will get out of this crisis. Now, obviously, what is happening in the Middle East is just one aspect, because the other major event of last week, which did not stop last week, but it started last week, Monday, with the German farmers being supported by, transport firms, by truck drivers, by bakers, by craftsmen. They started a week-long protest in, many, many cities in Germany, actually 100 cities, all 16 states, blocking highways, making large rallies, blocking the traffic in all of these cities, and then culminating in a big rally in Berlin at the Brandenburger Tor on Saturday, where basically, the German Finance Minister Lindner spoke also on the invitation of the Farmers Association, and his speech was completely booed out because he said no compromise on the cuts the government is intending to make in this support for the prices of the fuel for the farmers. So this is basically an unresolved situation. In the coming week, truckers will, basically do likewise. And in the meantime, this protest is spreading to Italy. On the 22nd of this month, there will be a large Italian farmers protest, and they are already, making contact with the German farmers. And it is spreading now to France, and the French farmers are protesting. Now, this is obviously the absolute nightmare of the establishments who have completely, moved away from the interest, the daily interest of the population, to such an extent that this is like an ocean, like a gulf, because the governments are pursuing their specific, power games and interest, and they have lost the trust of the population in almost every country. Now, this was also demonstrated by the fact that Trump won the caucus in Iowa with 51%, and then DeSantis and Nikki Haley, the two other major contenders, got somewhere around 20%. So he by far got more percent than the two together. And he is clearly the recognized frontrunner for the Republican ticket, which is absolutely freaking out the liberal establishment on two sides of the Atlantic. But as it was with the first vote for Trump is getting the vote of his base. But there are a lot of people who are also expressing just a complete rejection of the neoliberal paradigm. So, so you have a situation where the establishments of the neoliberal so-called rules-based order, which nobody knows what these rules ever have been, if they ever were there, the population has moved away. The establishments are really scared. And what do? Well, on the one side, they have this mega show in Davos, where all the millionaires and billionaires of this world and the hangers onto power are meeting. So this time the title of the Davos conference was "Regaining Trust." Well, they will not regain trust, because in order to do that, they would have to change policy, and there's no sign that they are willing to do that. What you have instead, and I think people should really pay attention to that while the war danger is real, and why the continuation of this present policy, if it's not changed, has the clear danger of leading to a global war. There are also in many countries war scare stories popping out of the media. Bild-Zeitung, for example, they claimed in the past week, immediately as a reaction to the farmers' protest, that supposedly Bild-Zeitung got their hands on a leaked document of the defense ministry saying, there may be war with Russia in the summer 25 already. Now that happens to be the time of the federal election. How convenient. So maybe you don't need elections if there's this war danger. But, similar stories have appeared in Finland, war in 2 years, Sweden, war in 3 years with Russia. And one should really be aware of the fact that, there is a very large psychological warfare component in all of that, by basically, trying to get people back in control. Don't go on the street, don't challenge the present policies, because there is this war danger, and supposedly the enemy is Russia, China, Iran, and so forth. So I think, one has to differentiate between the real danger that this present geopolitical confrontation, where NATO, the countries of Europe, the United States, plus a few others like Japan, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, that they somehow are trying to form a bloc against the BRICS plus the global South, the global majority. But if you look at the numbers, the North Atlantic Alliance countries, which are now claiming that they have some business in the Pacific for whatever reason, they're a minority. The global majority are 85% of the world population, and they are determined to go for a new economic system which allows the economic development of all of them. They're working with China because the rise of China has given them an alternative to the Western neoliberal model. And rather than saying, how can we talk to these countries, how can we cooperate and solve the problems of the world together, the West is trying to stay with their unipolar position, which they have lost in any case irreversibly already, but they don't want to admit that and recognize it. So while this geopolitical confrontation is going on, the war danger is very real and will increase. So, what people can do is basically, go in the direction of supporting the farmers for once. They need the unbroken support of the entire population, all segments. But we need to move to a completely new paradigm of working together as the one humanity and stop this idea that Russia, China, and the global South are the enemy of mankind, because they are not.
Now we have, as I said, many questions that came in before we started the discussion. Let me remind you, you're listening to Helga Zepp-LaRouche, Here's your chance to let her know what you're thinking. So you can send it to us at questions@schillerinstitute.org. We have a question from Munashi, actually two questions. He said, in the current geopolitical tensions, what are the key steps which can be taken to promote a dialogue and negotiation between global powers and the global majority? And how can your proposed fundamental principles contribute to shaping this new paradigm?
Well, the optimal thing obviously would be if the UN Security Council, the UN General Assembly, or some, organization like that would just put it on the agenda and say we need a new security and development architecture. Let's discuss what are the components of this to make it work. Now, given the veto power of the US, which they have applied in many occasions recently, it's not likely that this will happen like that. So I think, we need a better dialogue in the population about statecraft, about what it takes to self-govern, not only in one country, but among all countries in the world. And why not have student bodies? You can organize, if you are a student in the university, you can organize a forum. You can organize, if you are a professor, you can organize dialogues among universities. If you are a member of a think tank, you can organize Zoom conferences among think tanks, or you can discuss, any kind of association you are part of. You can say, we are in a world crisis, and why not have a discussion how we, as the only intelligent species on the planet and maybe in the universe, how can we organize our affairs that we can all survive and have a future? And I think, anything is better than most people say, oh, the world is so horrible, I can't even watch the news anymore. And then they don't do anything. And that's the problem. So the more people, think of themselves as state citizens, who take responsibility for what develops in their country and beyond, the better. Because if we had a lot of educated state citizens, these politicians wouldn't get away with what they're doing.
Now I'm going to put two questions together here which build on what you've been talking about. One is from a contact from the United Kingdom about Blinken's recent trip to Southwest Asia. And he asks, what is Biden's actual policy? As the U.S. is calling on Israel to scale back the fighting, the U.S. seems to be expanding the war by joining the U.K. in targeting Yemen. And connected to that, we have another question from Paul, who I think is from the United Kingdom, who said, who are these Western governments representing? Bankers, Zionists? Is it even possible to negotiate with psychopaths?
Well, the hypocrisy is really quite enormous. I think, given the fact that the events in Gaza have been transmitted by many TV, live. There were gruesome reports about the dying in Gaza. So it's not that there is some horrible genocide happening behind closed walls. It is happening very much in the awareness of the world public. And obviously, the fact that 51 countries of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and then about 20, 30 other countries have come out on the side of South Africa in the suit. It is very clear that the world public is shifting, and the whole global South is shifting naturally and has been for quite some time on the side of the Palestinians. So I think that what this statement of Biden, trying to tell Israel to scale down the fight, it's a typical, I don't know, as a lady, I shouldn't say this, but I don't even know if you can say this. There is this cover your behind phrase. You know what I mean. And I think that that's what it is, because, at the same time, the weapon supply to Israel to conduct exactly the kinds of operation they are doing are continuing. So, where are the words and where are the deeds? So, I think, the answer to the second question, I don't know if you could call all these people psychopaths, but what you can say for sure is that they are so out of touch with reality that I think they may not even be able anymore to understand the real population. I give you one funny example. This finance minister Lindner, he was speaking at the podium. He was invited there to give a speech to the crowd. And before he spoke, his lips were, he was clearly scared what would be the response. And there was booing all the time against him. And then finally he spoke and nothing big happened. I mean, no eggs flew and nothing else. So afterwards he was very relieved. But he said in his speech, oh, I understand your problems of the agriculture so well, because one time I was in the countryside and I cleaned out the horse barn, so I know how hard you are working all day. If you're doing this all day long, I can understand how hard this is. And then later on, a woman, also a farm representative, she turned to Lindner and she said, well, if you think that going one time to a horse barn and cleaning it one time gives you any knowledge about agriculture, you are completely off the wall. And that's typical, I think that was so telling, because that is the problem with these people, that most of them really have no idea what the hardships are for the population, what are the problems, because they're sitting in their, in their nice ministries and go from conference to conference, in jets, which are, very luxurious. So they don't get it. So I think the only thing which can be done is, you have to support what the farmers are doing, and every segment of the population should ally with them, because, we need a complete change in policy. We need to reject this fraudulent ecological policy, which, is only used to create another bubble, and the farmers are quite aware of that. And then we need to go back to a policy, like in the post-war period, focusing on, in the time of the reconstruction of Germany, focusing on scientific and technological progress, on values, like industriousness, on, honesty, on all of these things, which it seems that we have lost in the West, and only the Chinese seem to have these values these days. And we need to go back to our own great classical culture. So it's not that there is no way how we can solve it, but it does require the much more active intervention by a lot of citizens.
Again, this is Helga Zepp-LaRouche you're listening to. She has an article on the farm demonstrations. It's posted on the schillerinstitute.com website. Now, Helga, we have a question from Suman from India, who's one of the signers of some of our initiatives. And he asks, how would a BRICS currency help in overcoming the economic problems of third world countries?
Oh, I think it is very clear that, the new development bank, which already started working in Shanghai under the leadership of Dilma Rousseff, about which President Lula said that it will become the great bank of the global South. It will be a bank which, like certain other banks which already exist around the Belt and Road Initiative, they will give out credit for investment in productive areas like industry, agriculture, infrastructure, science, technology. And I think that the idea of a separate reserve currency, which I know countries are working on, it simply will mean that the countries who are part of this new system will not be dependent any longer on the IMF conditionalities. I mean, we are aware of these IMF conditionalities since, many, many decades, because, they basically are largely responsible for the present condition of many developing countries, actually before China came into the play, because they were forbidding investment in infrastructure, forbidding investment in a health system, education system, and forcing the respective countries to pay their debt first. So if you want to talk about a debt trap, it's not China which caused the debt trap. I mean, most of the debt of African nations, for example, are owed to the banks of the Paris Club. And if you have now the idea of having, first of all, trade in the native currencies, that is happening already all over the place, in rupees, in rubles, in renminbi, in real, in all kinds of other local currencies. That already, basically gives a greater sovereignty of the country to these trade conditions. But then, especially, when you have a credit system which functions like a clearinghouse between the different national systems, like every country should have a national bank, and then you have clearinghouses to regulate long-term international investments among these different countries. It will be totally regulated by the sovereign decision of these countries, and not by some political criteria and sermons that countries should have the following social changes, or democracy, rule of law. These are all synonyms for some intervention into the internal affairs of the respective countries. And once there is this new system, it will give much greater power to the sovereign countries themselves. And it would be most advisable for the countries of the global south to join that, because you see, the problem is not a conflict among countries. The conflict is between what we call the British Empire, but the British Empire is not the British people. It is the system of neoliberal finance sitting in the Wall Street, sitting in Silicon Valley, sitting in the City of London, and the associated military-industrial complex. So if you look at the major investment firms of these entities, the military-industrial complex associated with that, and the food cartels and the insurance companies, you see that all of this is completely interwoven. So the enemy, in quote, is not countries and conflict among countries, but it is this system of exploitation run to the benefit of the few, those people who can afford to speculate big time, who are becoming richer and richer by the day, and the vast majority of countries who are becoming poorer in every country around the globe. So I think the more quickly everybody moves to a new system, which used to be called the American system of Alexander Hamilton, and which is applied today by many countries, and which is very close, actually is the tradition of what Lyndon LaRouche developed in terms of his physical economy and the associated credit system with it. So all of these things are available, and I think we may even see the big change to this in this present year of 2024.
Helga, I have two more questions for you, if we can take them quickly. I think these are quite significant. We have from Diana, who always watches you from Canada, who just said she's so happy to see the German farmers and others standing up for the people. And there's a second question on the farm issue from someone who identifies herself as a small town girl. She asks, will the farm demonstrations fizzle out in Germany or keep expanding, and how can we support them?
Well, as of now, I don't think they will fizzle out, simply because the German government is playing hard. I mean, they are not giving up. They are not making a compromise. So the farmers have said that since this is a fight for their existence, especially the smaller and medium-sized farms, I think it will continue. And as I said, it will now spread to the logistics people, to the truckers, to the transport people. And I can only say, send support messages. Come to wherever you are. I don't know if it's feasible wherever you are, but if you are someplace close by these demonstrations, join them. Or, contact the Schiller Institute, and we will, make sure that we find some way how you can get active. And many farmers have told us, since they are really out on a limb, they like one farmer made a very moving video, which is on the internet, and we can actually post it. It's in German, but I think it will, you can get the idea. This is from a farmer who said that he drove with his tractor 1,200 kilometers, back and forth 600 kilometers, that he had to spend €100 for a hotel, and that many of his colleagues, did likewise, and many of them slept in their tractor in a freezing cold. And he said, we did all of that, and then there was nobody from the government to talk to us. And he said he has never experienced something so degrading and so, careless, so absolutely indifferent to what is going on in the population. And he and many others said, therefore, it is so important when they see support from the population and they get a thumbs up, by people standing on the sideways. So find a way of organizing in your environment, supporting this, because, I'm very happy that the German farmers had the courage to do that, because Germany is about to collapse. It's not just the farmers. I would really hope that the other organizations, like the medium-sized industries, would join, because the farmers have taken the responsibility to fight for the interest of all of Germany. Germany is collapsing. The Mittelstand, the industry is in a free fall. Because of the same reasons why the farmers can't make it, the energy prices, the absolutely insane bureaucratic rules coming from Berlin, but also from Brussels. So, I can only say, do something to organize support for this movement, because they're fighting not only for themselves, they're fighting for all of Germany and actually the whole world.
And here's the final question, which is a reference, I think, to what you said earlier about what we're seeing is a rejection worldwide against the establishment, including the vote in Iowa. Daniel said, I don't see the vote in Iowa as a reaction to the collapse of the West, but as a protest against immigration. And he says, what is your view of this?
Well, yeah, but what is immigration? Why is there a refugee problem? I think that all the problems in the world can be really brought down to the fact that the so-called rules-based order, especially after the end of the Cold War, this was a branching point where, communism was giving up by free will, without violence, no tanks, peacefully disintegrating. And, we had a peace plan proposal. This was, Lynn and LaRouche and our organization. We proposed the Eurasian land bridge to connect all of Europe and Asia through development corridors, and, also connect that then with similar corridors in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. Now, that would have been the economic basis for a peace plan. It would have meant to go back to Franklin D. Roosevelt's original idea what he thought the Bretton Woods system should have become, namely a mechanism to increase massively the living standard in the so-called developing sector. Now, Roosevelt died at the wrong moment. Truman took over, Churchill, and they designed the Bretton Woods system in order not to end the underdevelopment of the developing countries. So colonialism continued. And what you are seeing right now with the rebellion of the global South is the absolute determination to end this colonialism in its new form. Now, why are people migrating as refugees, through the Americas to the Mexican-American border? Why are they risking to drown in the Mediterranean to get to Europe, where they are not treated very friendly? Why are there refugee problems at all? Because of a lack of development. If you had prosperous countries in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, people would stay home. Everybody likes their home normally better than some faraway country. So the migrant question as such is already the result of this colonialism in its modern form. And I'm not sure if Trump, if he become president, has the wisdom to ally with the countries of the global South, because that's the only way how this problem can be solved. So I think that, you should rethink it, because it may not be so easy and so simple, but I think that what you have right now is a revolt of the global South and the revolt of the countries protesting against the colonial conditions for them, and the fight of the farmers protesting against the same mechanism, the same financial system, the same cartels, the same structures. Then you recognize that the situation hangs much more together than you would think.
Well, let me call people's attention to an international youth call that we will be holding. People should join from any part of the world to discuss how to be a part of this organizing movement. We'll be posting in the chat page a link to the call. It's this Saturday, January 20th at 11 a.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Central Europe time. So with that, Helga, thank you for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you again next week.
Yes, and get active in the meantime with us.